When you think of war, you probably picture armies, uniforms, formations, two sides facing each other across an open field, something organized, something almost formal. But for the vast majority of human history, war looked nothing like that. It looked far more personal, far more brutal, and far more constant than most people realize. So what did war actually look like before civilization built rules around it? For decades, many anthropologists believed early humans were mostly peaceful, that warfare was a modern invention brought on by agriculture, cities, and greed. It was a comforting idea. It was also, according to the evidence, largely wrong. An archaeologist named Lawrence Keeley spent years examining prehistoric burial sites, weapons, and settlement patterns across the world. In his research, published in his book War Before Civilization, Keeley found something the peaceful theory couldn't explain. Across dozens of prehistoric societies, on nearly every continent, roughly 1 in 4 adult males died from violence inflicted by other humans, not 1 in 100, 1 in 4. To put that in perspective, that death rate is higher than what most nations suffered during the deadliest wars of the 20th century. Prehistoric humans, it turns out, were not living in some peaceful golden age. They were living in a world where nearly a quarter of the men around you might eventually be killed by another person. But this wasn't war the way you picture it. There were no marching armies, no grand battles. Another archaeologist, Steven LeBlanc, who spent decades studying ancient conflict sites in the American Southwest, found that most prehistoric violence looked completely different. It looked like the ambush. LeBlanc's research shows that early human conflict was defined by raids at dawn, quick and brutal, hitting a rival camp while its members were still asleep. Villages built defensive walls not to survive sieges, but to survive exactly this. Sudden, silent, and devastating attacks meant to wipe out as many people as possible before anyone could fight back. Why would prehistoric humans fight this way, instead of in open confrontation? Part of the answer comes from a controversial but influential anthropologist named Napoleon Chagnon, who lived among the Yanomami people of the Amazon for years, one of the last documented societies where this exact pattern of warfare was still active. Chagnon observed that pitched face-to-face battles were actually rare and usually stopped quickly, because the risk to both sides was simply too high. A small tribe couldn't afford to lose several fighters in a single afternoon. There was no replacement population waiting behind the front line, so conflict shifted towards something colder and more calculated. Ambush minimized your own losses while maximizing the enemy's. It wasn't about honor, it was about survival math. And the targets weren't random either. Chagnon's fieldwork, along with Keeley's and LeBlanc's findings elsewhere, shows a consistent pattern. Prehistoric warfare rarely happened over abstract ideology. It happened over resources, territory, hunting grounds, water access, and, disturbingly often, women, who were sometimes abducted during raids as part of the underlying motive. This paints a very different picture of your ancestors than the one most people carry around. Not noble warriors meeting on a battlefield, and not peaceful farmers who somehow invented cruelty later. Something colder, a near-constant low-level threat, where the greatest danger wasn't the enemy you could see, but the one who came for you while you slept, which raises an uncomfortable question about the instinct still sitting inside you. That instinct to lock your doors at night, the tension you feel walking somewhere unfamiliar after dark, the way your body tightens at the sound of something moving outside where it shouldn't be. None of that fear is irrational. It's inherited. For most of the time your species has existed. Dawn wasn't just the start of a new day. It was historically one of the most dangerous moments a person could face, the exact hour raiders were most likely to strike. You don't live in that world anymore. Your locked door tonight will almost certainly keep you safe. But somewhere underneath that modern calm, your body is still running code written by ancestors who couldn't afford to assume the same thing. So the next time you check that lock without quite knowing why, or feel your pulse rise at an unfamiliar sound in the dark, remember what you're picturing when you think of war. It was never really the battlefield. It was always the ambush at dawn.